So who is that guy? Who is that guy on that screen?
Hey, Doc, what's going on?
Hey, Patrick. Okay, so here we are at the Recovery Crew. The Recovery Crew podcast has gone live with videos, and it's fortunate that we're both really handsome guys and also very humble and handsome. And that we're taking the Recovery Crew at Deep Waters Recovery. We're taking it live. And I'm not sure what platforms it's going to wind up on, but I do know that there'll probably be a YouTube version of this as well as Facebook. And so you'll be able to find this podcast where you have always found the Recovery Crew podcast on our website at deepwatersrecovery.com. And we're on all the podcast platforms. And so today we are going to take a look at a couple of things. One is a superstar dude named Patrick McGowan. He's going to tell his story. We're going to get a little bit of what walls did he crash into that woke him up, because he's kind of a slick, good-looking guy. You see that? Kind of a slick, good-looking. Those guys don't have to do recovery unless they slam into some good walls. So hopefully we'll get some interesting.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and also we're going to launch into step 3. We're going to this is the next one in the series of 12 where folks can use this as sort of an intro to the steps if you want, or for somebody that's like recycling themselves, it's an interesting way to just go back and think about the steps. One thing is we really encourage anyone to call us or write in any questions, and we'll try to answer it on the next podcast. I am semi-frantically looking for that number, which I'll get that back in a minute. But deepwatersrecovery.com, you can send an email that way. But we really like to answer your questions on here too. Also, I just want to, before we launch too far here, Deepwater's Recovery Program is forming groups right now online, because we're recording this during a pretty interesting time in the world, just an intense pandemic. That's all. Yeah, I don't want to make too much fun of it though. Lots of sensitivity going on right now, and we want to be loving and kind. And there's people that are really struggling right now. But and step 3 is not a bad topic to be on during times when there's a lot of pain. But let me see here. This is like low. I guess we're kind of low tech in terms of. So here's the phone number. It is 512-677-7847. And if you want to send an email with your questions or to be participatory in this, in the Recovery Crew, it's admin@deepwatersrecovery.com. And I'll give that again. It's admin@deepwatersrecovery.com. 512-677-7847. And man, do I sound like a sports announcer or something. I don't know how I got here, but anyway, here we have Patrick McGowan. I want to just tell you a little bit about him. He's kind of a sports management guy. I think you got your business degree from Kansas, right? University of Kansas.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and he's from Kansas is somewhere. Are you from the South? Where are you from?
I'm from Dallas, Fort Worth.
That's right. That's where the yes sir comes from. Sir,
yep.
Yes, sir. And so there's a lot to the story. I'm going to let you launch into some of it, but he works for Origins, which is a incredibly good treatment center that I'll let you say a little bit more about. It's okay to pitch anything that you want, because I only bring people on here that are doing the real deal. And anybody that hires Patrick McGowan is one of the top treatment centers. So that's one of the ways I find out if a treatment center is doing good work. It's the quality of the folks that they have delivering and bringing what they're up to the world. So let's just I'm getting tired of hearing myself talk. So let's turn it over to you. I'd just like you to kind of intro yourself and maybe just tell us maybe part 1 or of your recovery story, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate the invitation to come out and do this, especially in, like you said, these crazy times in a pandemic. where I'm sitting at my apartment with my girlfriend and my 2 dogs. So this is cool to see a friendly face, and I'm really excited to be here. To get the pitch out of the way, I work for Origins Behavioral Healthcare. I'm actually an alumni of there of 2014. It's actually the place that brought me the solution. It was the first facility I went to, and I have gone to a lot in 2 years, and they were the only ones to show me there was a way out, and there was a way to get well and stay well. And for that, I'll forever be grateful. We have 2 different facilities, one in West Palm Beach, Florida, and the other in South Padre Island. All are gender specific. So we have men and women on both areas. And then in West Palm Beach, Florida, we also have the Center for Older Adult Recovery. There we go, the COAR unit, which specializes in older adults 16 up, or anybody that's medically compromised from, running and gunning, drinking themselves some of their liver down, or maybe shooting a little bit too much dope with that alcohol. So I'll dive in real quick. I won't really talk too much about my childhood and things like that, because overall,
we wouldn't want to talk about our childhood. Oh.
No, because remember when I came to Braveheart, I had no problems with that. When I didn't have anything there, but
yeah,
I grew up. But
yeah, by the way, Patrick McGowan went through the professionals version of the Braveheart experience, which is a really intense weekend that takes people into healing the trauma that lives underneath our addiction. It doesn't cause our addiction, but we do know that you got to do that work. So I'm open to you talking a little bit about that if you want to sometime during this, but go for it, brother.
Okay, absolutely. So, I grew up oldest of 4 kids. My parents both stayed at home. My dad worked. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Great family unit. I look back, I know we had our crazy. We were loud. I see that in my relationships today. I blow up and then apologize, and have some of those dynamics from the family. But overall, I'd have to say 99% of the world would be okay with the childhood that I had, and I was. I don't ever have that feeling of being different than, like feeling left, like I didn't belong in groups of people. I'm a chameleon and a social butterfly, so to speak. So throughout life, I've been able to shape shift and fit in where needed and survive. And in the process of doing that, I remember I was like at 14, maybe 9th grade, and my mom had, my buddies were getting in trouble for drinking, and I hadn't drank yet, and I hadn't been caught yet, and doing anything. My mom kind of just alluded, hey, like the entire side of your dad's family is alcoholic. Like every male on that side, your grandpa and all his siblings are all alcoholics. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no worries. And she was like, okay, well, just so you know, sounds good, Mom. Fast forward, another year, I'm a sophomore in high school, and I start drinking, and I'm like, this is it. This is the coolest thing in the world. Like, it makes me feel even more, makes me feel comfortable in just being me. I don't have to shape shift to be comfortable. And so, I had these, like, I'm not going to do this, right? So I was 15 and I wasn't going to drink, and then I drank, and I was like, well, I'm not going to, do drugs, that would be bad. Then I started smoking weed, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna, sell weed or do anything else. I'm just gonna drink and smoke. And so, from teen on, I'm already setting these barriers of like what I'm not gonna do. And then I would, jump over them and be like, okay, well, that was kind of rash. I started like bargaining with myself about what else I could do. Really, I get through high school. I get into the University of Kansas. That's where my parents went. So I've always grew up at Big Jayhawk. And so I applied to a couple other schools, but I was going there. I joined a fraternity up there, and
we go.
There it is. Yeah. And then that's where the fun started, because every one of these 80 dudes I lived with drank like I did. Right. Maybe. And the ones that didn't, they were just kind of weird. That's kind of what I thought. I was like, I don't like these guys. These guys who are going to class and doing the thing they need to do, not about that. And so, but the ironic part was as I continued on, right, I had a couple buddies that would keep on the same level of drinking and using drugs, because by sophomore year, I had developed a nice little cocaine habit. I started, dabbling in other uppers, just things that people would. I was at a bar, somebody had them, and I'm like, absolutely, why not just try it? I started burning through money, and my parents kind of had an idea about what was going on. But I was doing good in school. Everything was on the outside looked fine. So they kind of just chalked it up to being like young and dumb.
Yeah.
And that was what I ran with for a while. I kept telling my parents, hey, look, just drinking too much, going to the bars, blacking out. And it was kind of like this like unknown, you're 9 hours away, so we're going to take your word for it. And I don't believe they wanted to believe, right? Like I'm the oldest. They didn't have any experience with any type of like drug addiction or anything in the family. And so I think that was just kind of like the blinders were put on and they were like, all right, he's doing well, you know? My junior year, I remember vividly, to this day. I remember like the feeling in the room. I was sitting on a futon, you know, everything in the house off Ohio Street. And I can tell you to the spot of the first time I did Oxycontin. A couple buddies had it, offered it to me. I was, and they were like, it's a painkiller. I was like, okay, I'll try that, you know, and we were just hanging out. I think it was like a Wednesday night, you know, we weren't doing much. And I remember snorting it and the feeling that overtook me was like, to this day, nothing I've experienced. In that moment, I was like, okay, the drinking was good. The cocaine was fun. The weed is still awesome. You know, it's just kind of like an appetizer to everything. But this is it.
Yep. There's choirs singing, right?
Yes.
In
Yes.
the background.
That was it. I didn't care about anything else. I was like, this is what I need to do. And I didn't know, right? This is 2008, 2009. So the opiate epidemic hadn't gotten the national news yet, right? So I knew it was bad. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, though. And I didn't know how quickly the addiction was going to form and how the physical dependence was just going to take me to a level that I didn't even know existed. And so we're going to fast forward through that and up to the point where, you know, I can tell you I tried to quit so many different times from 2008 to 2012 when I graduated college. I did 5 years because, you know, make that extra victory lap, which is probably the best and worst thing for me, because what happened is all my buddies graduated, and the ones that were kind of keeping the bumpers on, my pledge brothers, they all graduated. And so I was left there floundering in a city. And it helped me reach a bottom much quicker. I got out of college. I moved home, and my parents were like, "You're 140 pounds. Like, you look like death." And then I got arrested shortly thereafter. And so this started my trips to treatment. You know, I went 4 times from 2012 to 2014. I'd say there was one place in Houston called the Wheelhouse. It's state funded, nonprofit, not even state funded. I'm sorry, donation funded. And it's an amazing place. If you got nowhere to go, they present you the big book and the 12 steps.
Yeah.
I wasn't willing to hear it at that point. I was 21. My parents dropped me off there. I was like, not doing this. And so I do look back on it and say that one place, but they sent me across the country, Utah, North Carolina, and everywhere in between to try to get this solution that was literally, you know, within a book of 164 pages. Yeah. The thing that makes me the most frustrated about the first parts of those treatment centers is that they at no point told me there was a solution and told me to just stop using. If you know, I had a therapist tell me if I loved my mom, I would stop. I was like, hey, I've been trying to do this, lady. Like, I trust me and my mom have had that conversation. And if I could just stop, I would have stopped way before coming to see you.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about with having, you know, any treatment center has a guy like you. I know there's somebody there that has a solution, and unfortunately it's rare. But we don't have to launch on our resentments about that. We'll get to that when we talk about the 4th step.
Right. I was about to say, yeah. And so, you know, after leaving Origins in 2014, I stayed sober for 2.5 years. They presented a solution. They got me through I stayed there 60 days. And in that time, I got through the 12 steps. So when I left to go to Kerrville for sober living, I had an experience with God and with the work. And that's something I had never had prior. You know, I kept saying I was a chronic relapser, and everyone's like, you just never really stopped. You just kind of paused for 30 days. Yeah. And that resonated because I was like, okay, well, yeah, and I've never had anything to substitute, right? I never had anything that made me to supersede on my behalf. And for just under 2.5 years, I stayed sober in Kerrville. I started working, with youth, CPS and youth and actually in the field as well. And I found a passion of, kind of helping other people. And what I really enjoyed in this world was helping other people get well.
Yeah, because you're a business guy. You could be doing a lot of stuff. right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that was a big thing is I never planned on and being in working in treatment. You know, I one didn't know it existed until I went, and then two, it was just never something I really thought I would utilize my degree for or anything like that. And I kept kind of getting pushed in that direction. Um, the end of 2016, after a few years sober, I'd stopped doing the work, you know, that summer of 2016, and I started drinking December of 2016, and started doing cocaine shortly thereafter again, and pushing off on this dark relapse of having
So
times.
you got it. So you've got a good you've got the story of diving back in and the progression to the disease. You have that part of the story too.
Yeah. And that's kind of, you know, I went on a bender for, you know, of everything in between from, you know, IV heroin and cocaine and alcohol and everything from December to March. I got sober March 23rd of 2017. And I can tell you, I thought I was just going to drink. That was the first thing. I was never really an alcoholic. You know, I kept doing that thing. I started drinking, and then a week later I started doing cocaine. And so from the second week of January, which was probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks in on the relapse, I started to try to stop for the next 3 months. Um,
Mm.
I I remember coming back into this program, and really in my head saying, you know, I've had the experience. It's not going to work again. I'm willing to give it a shot, and then I'd go back out. I go back
Yeah.
out. I go back. I got sober on a mattress pad in San Antonio. You know, I didn't I didn't get to go back to treatment. It was
It was
offered.
a
I
real
was
upscale program.
very upscale, very detox friendly.
Yeah.
And I shook it out for about a week. You know, and in the process of that, and getting back through the work very quickly, I'm in a position today where I am. And I'll stop there just real briefly and see if
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
good.
That's good because it's a good transition, and we'll get you back
Okay.
next week, I think, or it might be the week after, and and we'll hear part two
Okay.
because man, you've really been doing the deal, and you've also had the opportunity to really be the superstar in recovery and then crash and burn and come back out. And there's folks out there that you know, it's hard to come back. It is
Yeah.
hard to come back, man. So you know, I have that experience in a couple of other 12-step programs. It is just so hard to drag myself back in there, and um, you know, here at Deep Waters, we have this little moniker: recover, heal, and launch, meaning, you know, you got to get the deal, and then we got to deal with the stuff underneath the surface. And then the thing that seems uh, relevant for our discussion here is that you've found some passion. You have found a way to launch yourself into a meaningful life. That's
Mhm.
uh, there's an old mentor of mine that says, yeah, yeah, you relapsed because you didn't. You stopped going to meetings and you stopped talking to your sponsor. Okay, yeah, that's what everybody says. Also, did you get something meaningful happening in your life? You
Yeah.
got to have something to fill that big gaping hole that we carved out with all that using, right?
Hmm.
I mean,
Right. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I
yeah,
think that there's something with when I took notes today, just thinking of things to talk about. And one of the big things is that spiritual growth stopped. It came to a complete end. And in that process, everything else that was underneath had just kind of overgrew and then pushed out.
yeah. So there's a good transition. Let's make this. Let's do a little bit of a intro to the third step here. So
Okay.
on the recovery crew, we've talked about the coming in and having to take a look at how unmanageable everything is. For a lot of us, that's pretty easy to look at the outside. We train, especially if you're in a jail cell or something, or you've lost your family, or you know, life is unmanageable. It's obvious,
Right.
and I can't stop using. That's the first step. The second step is pretty much uh, wondering if there's a possibility that it could change and that there's a power other than my giant, beautiful brain that got me in this shit, right? That
Right.
might be able to help me. Sometimes, you know, you look around, you see a guy like Patrick. Now maybe there's a guy that could help me, right? I mean,
Right.
that's what we do in 12-step recovery. That's what happened in the 30s. They figured that out. Nothing else works. You can hit people in the head with 2x4s. You can try to bleed them. You can shame them. You can hit them with a Bible, but they will not stop drinking. The
Right.
only thing that helps is another alcoholic. It's so simple and so beautiful. Uh, But this whole thing, those of us that have been, we've got some, what's the word? We're sort of snide about it. We're sort of uh, unsure. We're hurt. We're wounded. We are resentful toward anything that is religious, or that somebody's going to try to cram some religious stuff down our throat. Most people have come into 12-step recovery with some version of a resistance to letting go of control. I think is the way that I would say it. But
Right.
it's either let go of control or go back and really have a good chance of dying. So
Yeah.
usually when people get to the third step, they have enough. They've let go. They have they've detoxed enough to feel the actual pain of the life that they've been living, and maybe there's a chance they could make a different thing. In the 12 and 12, it says practicing step 3 is like opening a door which to all appearances is still closed and locked. All we need is a key and the decision to swing the door open. There's only one key, and it's called willingness, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to launch you with that. So say something about step 3.
My experience with step 3, there was two things. One, right, is that after I grew up Catholic, no issues with God. I never had this I have buddies that I knew grew up Catholic and absolutely hated God, and they didn't have a reason why, right? They just did. They didn't like anything to do with religion, and I get that. And I've met and worked with guys like that, and I've worked with guys that knew the Bible inside and out but couldn't stay sober, right? My experience with step 2 was that, okay, this kind of seems lofty. So when I got to step 3, I remember looking at my sponsor in Kerrville and being like, this is 2014, being like, all right, we're going to revisit this because I went through the work and I had this experience at treatment, but now I'm in the real world, and step 3 is kind of, I don't want to give up, turn over my will, my life, my sex life, or my financial life to God. It was easy in treatment. I had nothing else to do. And he just kind of was like, hey, would you consider doing the rest of the work again? And I was like, well, I could do that. And that's what he did for me. He made it very simple. And that's what the sponsor did in 2017 as well. He said, hey, look, we're going to say this prayer. What we're going to do from there is we're going to have you launch into a fourth. And we're going to have you move all through the work. And through by taking those steps, your decision will be solidified. And I didn't really, once again, believe that at all. I thought they were kind of lofty. I was like, this kind of sounds like some voodoo shit, for lack of a better term. But it worked. I think that the biggest part for me was to realize how the ego, and this happens for me, it happened a couple times through the work, is how the ego does not want me to take the third step. The ego has sheltered itself, and by me taking and relinquishing this control and turning that over, that eliminates the ego. If I'm practicing that on a daily basis.
Of course, my ego, the way that I was doing it was working.
Right.
Why would I? And it worked for a long time. That day, like you were talking about, that day when you had what I call the counterfeit feeling of God. That moment when you were snorting opiates, right? It was like, whoa, that's the closest thing to God I've ever felt. Why would you let go of that? I have a solution until it doesn't work anymore enough times.
Right.
And then maybe we turn our hearts toward the possibility of an authentic experience of God, or whatever language you want to use. Some folks, the word God is just absolutely, you're not gonna get their attention with that one, baby.
Right. No, absolutely.
So it's a leap of faith, right?
And I think that a lot of people. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm just saying, to all of us really smart guys, that's all kind of woo-woo stuff that somebody. I mean, there is a factor of having to not be cool to do this stuff. Don't we say that sometimes in the rooms? It is impossible to be cool. Now Patrick McGowan possibly is pulling it off. I don't know, but
I wish. I have enough guys and people that in the state of Texas that have seen my ass more times than I'd care to admit in sobriety. My experience, the biggest takeaway I can remember with step 3, and then this is something for a little bit later too, is that the first thing is that when I drove to Kerrville from San Antonio on March 23rd and said to my sponsor, I'm either going to do the work or kill myself, that step 3 was very easy, right? When I had that first step experience, it was very easy for me to continue on. when early on, I thought I'd come to the third step and I was like, well, I haven't tried just like smoking opiates, or I haven't tried just drinking. I'd have all these different ideas. So this third step, just like you said, I still had in my mind thought I had a different way.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's a softening. I think there's a softening that happens. The 12 steps are psychodynamic. And when I say
mhm.
psychodynamic, I mean they soften the ego such that we can start looking at the deeper stuff. These steps are in order for a reason. They're
Right.
softening us up because the fourth step's coming, and we're going to be looking at the really darker stuff that our really intense ego has been keeping hidden, right? I mean, so the third step is what is so we're moving toward the end of this podcast. When we say made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as we understood God, right? As we
Yeah.
understood God, by the way, is underlined, right? It doesn't
Right.
have to be Patrick's version, Bob's version, no one's version. But what does that actually mean? Somebody that's fairly new coming in, what are we telling them really needs to happen there? If you could speak to that.
Yeah. So, I think the biggest thing for me is that if this is my first time on the third step, what that means is to follow your sponsor suggestions and get through the rest of the work, right? That's as simple as somebody made it for me. And it was the best thing that
Wow.
ever happened to me, was because I was like, turn my will, my life, and follow these directions. It just, my head was blowing up, right? Mind you, I'm also detoxing,
Right.
so I don't know what I'm going to do. Uh, but at the end of the day, what it means is like I'm doing the next right thing. I'm trying to be helpful to other people, and by seeking God each morning, by sitting quietly in prayer and meditation, and trying to not just be an asshole, right? Like it's kind of one of those things. Like same stuff,
Yeah,
same
that's
stuff
the
as
step
social
three.
distancing,
You could
right?
shorten step three into stop being an asshole, Patrick. Bob.
Well, for me, it was like it's the same thing as right now. It's like I'm not like terrified of the pandemic, right? But in my job as a fellow human on this earth is not to be an asshole and social distance with my girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
And be a good person to make sure that I'm not going to give it to somebody else. And so it's in the same
Yeah.
way on the third step. It's like my job is, once I turn my will, my life, it's no longer my business, right? I go through my day and I'm a little bit more awake to how my actions affect other people. And it's it's the coolest.
Trust. It has to do with trust and faith and all those other foreign concepts, huh?
Yeah. And early on, yeah, really early on, it was just that stuff terrified me. And I didn't want to look at it.
Yeah. Well, uh, thank you. I think this is a good maybe this is a good place to transition. And,
Okay.
uh, hopefully we've thrown some things out there that are useful for folks as they're journeying through this path of trying to become themselves more. I think that's what I'm up to more than anything else in recovery, is trying to shed the stuff that I've gathered. Some of it's from my childhood. I'm not blaming it on anybody. I'm from the best family, by the way. I am from the best family, better than yours.
Right.
But and they were a mess too. We're all a mess. And can we all just be a mess and not have to work hard at showing something other than the fact that we're all beautifully broken and
Yeah.
we're all beautiful, both, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so next time we'll talk about the fourth step, which is taking an inventory of our lives and feeling the feelings that are under that. That fourth and fifth step are where we really get a chance to wake up emotionally, and I think it's like the meat of the work. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on that,
Yeah.
Patrick.
I'm
But
excited.
so, folks, we're going to make the transition here. Thanks for being here on the Recovery Crew. The plan is to bring in superstars like Patrick to really enhance this program here at Deep Waters Recovery. I want to remind everybody that groups are forming. We are doing a 10-hour program that's focused on the real deal recovery, healing from trauma. And yes, trauma healing can happen online. I was crying with these guys before we got on here. It's a it's a in fact there is a face-to-face component to this online thing that's different too. And for people that like to isolate, I can connect and isolate, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
um, but anyway, here I'm glad you guys joined us, and we are on all the podcast platforms. deepwatersrecovery.com. I'm going to give you the phone number if you know somebody that's interested in doing an outpatient intensive program. The third part is the launch component of our program, is Dr. Ryan Schoenbeck runs that part of the program for folks that really want to get some meaning rolling in their life. That's one of the things that we're focused on here at Deep Waters. So it's admin@deepwatersrecovery.com. Send us an email if you're interested in the program, or if you have anything you want to send to us about this podcast. We'd love to answer your questions or bring your points. Tell us we're so full of crap if you want to. That would be fun to dance with as well. The phone number is 512-677-7847. 512-677-7847. And thanks so much thank you, Patrick, for being here. And thanks for everyone for listening here. You're in the deep waters now.